Let's be ambitious. Ambitious. Why am I like this? What's shakin' bacon? Welcome to The Bartender and the Butcher. Today we'll be breaking down the one piece of pork everyone should know how to cut. And I'm talking about the boneless pork loin. Let's get started. Xavier and I are the self-proclaimed co-presidents of the Boneless Pork Loin fan club. It is the first piece of meat we recommend to people when they're learning how to cook or on a budget. It's one of the most affordable protein options because it often goes on sale, and it is super versatile to cook with. Now, I don't want you to confuse this pork loin with a pork tenderloin, which is much smaller. They're actually connected to each other in their whole form via a bone in between. So if you were to flip this over, the tenderloin would actually be connected right over here, and there would be a bone in between the two, and then that bone would run all the way down the loin. The tenderloin usually only goes to right about here. The beef equivalent of a pork loin is if a beef rib and a strip loin were still connected to each other. The reason that this is one whole piece instead of two like it is with beef is just because pigs are smaller than cows. There are three sections of a pork loin: the rib end, the middle, and the sirloin end. Starting with the rib end, it's defined by this darker bit of meat right here that wraps all the way around this end of the loin. Think of this darker meat the same way you think about dark meat in chicken. It's a little fattier, where the lighter meat is leaner. This end of the loin is closer to the head of the pig, and if this were beef, this is where our ribeyes would come from. This is mine and Xavier's favorite part of the loin because fat is flavor, but also we like to make a lot of roasts and stews, and because it's fattier, it can hold up to longer cooking times without drying out. The middle section and sirloin end of the loin are leaner than the rib end. If we were talking about beef, this is about where our strip loin would start, where New York strips come from. The middle of the loin makes the prettiest chops you'll see when we start cutting, and the sirloin end is closest to the butt of the pig. Now let's go over how I choose one loin over another when I'm at the store. I look for two characteristics. The first one is consistency in shape and size all the way down the loin. Naturally, as you go from the rib end to the sirloin end, it'll start to flatten and kind of splay. If you can see that this end is a smidge wider than this end. So I look for loins that are as uniform as possible from end to end. This is beneficial if you're cutting a lot of bigger roasts, because the more even the roast, the more even the cook. And like I mentioned, Xavier and I like the rib end of the loin, so the second characteristic I look for is a loin with a large portion of the dark rib meat on it. If you are a leaner meat kind of person, look for a loin with less dark meat. Now to start cutting, like with all at-home meat cutting, it's a choose-your-own-adventure. The general blueprint that I follow is pork chops of various thicknesses, a roast or two, and then chunks for stew or strips for stir fry. If I'm feeling particularly indecisive, then I will always opt to cut larger things like thicker chops and roasts. Because if I would like smaller portions in the future, then I can just cut one of the larger pieces that I have, but I can't turn a thin pork chop into a thick one. I always start by cutting a roast first, so I'm going to cut it off the rib end today, but I like a pork loin roast from any of the three sections. If you can see, that darker piece of meat kind of wraps around the loin. Put this aside. If you don't want to cut a roast, then I would recommend starting by squaring off your loin by cutting a little bit off of each end. This will flatten the ends out and help with even pork chop slicing. The butts of the loin, kind of like butts of bread, is what I would cut into chunks for stew or strips for stir fry. And if I think I don't have enough of either of those things from just the ends of the loin, then I'll just cut into the loin a little bit more until I have the amount that I want. Moving on to pork chops, I have three general thicknesses. Thin, which is a ½ inch or less, regular, which is about an inch, and thick, which is an 1.5 inches or more. But those are just my general measurements. Cut whatever size pork chops you want. You can cut chops like this. You can also cut them by holding the side that you're cutting off and hold them this way and slice them. Just whatever is the most comfortable. I cut pork chops either way. Doesn't super matter. I did start off when I first started cutting these by holding the end that I was cutting off. I think it helps keep it a little bit more stable for beginners, so take that as you will. Now, I'm not a super big fan of the regular thickness pork chop, but there are people in my family that like them, so I'll cut a few. I personally prefer thick pork chops because I like to cook my pork chops medium, and thicker ones are way more difficult to overcook. Another great thing about thick pork chops is that you can cut a small pocket down the center and stuff them. They're so versatile. But if I'm in a hurry, I really like thin pork chops because I can defrost them super quickly out of the freezer and they cook super fast. I usually don't trim much fat off my pork chops, if any, so use your own discretion in fat trimming. With this end I have left, I'm gonna cut some stew chunks. Xavier likes small stew chunks, so I will cut these a little bit smaller than I would if I were just thinking of myself. Another defining feature of the sirloin is when you get down there, when you start to cut the chops, you'll see this little bit of darker section of meat in the middle of the chop. That's just where the loin is turning into the actual pork sirloin. Honestly, you'd probably want them smaller than that. Now that we have all of our loin cut into its respective pieces, you know the drill. I'm gonna vacuum seal all these bad boys for the freezer. So I will meet you back here when I'm done with that. As far as cooking methods that I'd recommend, honestly, you can cook a pork loin any which way and it'll come out good. You can do the classic pan-sear or grilling of the chops, roasting of the roasts, stewing of the chunks. If I'm feeling bold, I like to pound chops out flat, bread them, and fry them for pork schnitzel. You can broil chops, you can stuff them and bake them. You can do pretty much whatever your tummy is in the mood for that day. Do keep in mind that this is a lean piece of meat and can come out super dry if you overcook it. That's why I like to cook my pork chops to medium, because yes, you can eat pork when it's still pink in the middle. But if that freaks you out, then I would recommend pulling your pork off the heat 5 to 10 degrees before your desired temperature. This way, while it rests, it'll carry over cook. And this will ensure that your pork is cooked all the way through, but still moist in the middle. And I mean, if you do happen to overcook your pork like all of us sometimes do, a good sauce can help remedy that. I hope I've opened you up to the vast world of the boneless pork loin. If you have any questions about today's video or about another meat topic, or there's a specific piece of meat you would like to see me cut, please leave it for us in a comment below. Thank you for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed and learned something. If you did, please leave us a like and subscribe for more bartending and butchery. And until next time. Oh, riggedy raggedy. Let's do this. Going, no, we'll be breaking down. That's what we'll be doing. We'll be breaking it down. My itches cannot touch it. They don't have back pockets in these pants. Unbox some raw meat with me. There's an airplane. Get this nice and dry. Of the... Man, I love words. Project a little more, Hannah. Project! Use that diaphragm for world. Wonderful. That's a hard word. Wonderful world. What if I just say vast? Oh. Enjoy today. Ah, no, that's not right. A little fumbly bumbly. Again! I like options. We're about to start the cutting portion of this. Very exciting. Oh, okay. Who's home?
I am kicking, filming ass today.
That was good. That was good. Good.